On the morning of August 9th, 1945, War Minister Anami Korechika sits in the conference room of the Supreme War Council in Tokyo. 6 men, the 6 most powerful men in Japan, are arguing. The Soviet Union declared war the previous night. 1.5 million troops are pouring across the Manchurian border. 3 days earlier, an atomic bomb erased Hiroshima from the map. But Anami is not yielding. He continues to argue that Japan can still fight, and that a decisive battle on the home islands might force the Allies to negotiate, while some senior military leaders, notably Admiral Toyoda, doubt that the United States can possess many atomic bombs. At that moment, a liaison officer steps into the room. He hands over a report. Anami reads it. A massive explosion has struck Nagasaki. A blinding flash. Fires spreading across the Urakami Valley. The pattern is already recognized. The last argument Anami had left has just been destroyed in front of him. But what happens next is one of the most confounding moments in the history of the Second World War. Anami does not change his position. He does not move. He does not revise a single word. This is the story of 9 days in which the Empire of Japan had every piece of information it needed to surrender, but did not possess the language to say it out loud. What reaches Imperial General Headquarters in Tokyo on the morning of August 6th, 1945, is not a report. It is an absence. Communications with the headquarters of the Second General Army in Hiroshima have gone dead, and no one in Tokyo can yet explain why. A duty officer tries to re-establish contact. Nothing comes back. He tries again. The line stays silent. He routes a request through the Japanese National Railway's telegraph office, which also cannot reach the city. A message is relayed to a military base 20 miles outside Hiroshima, asking for any information about what has happened inside. That report, when it finally arrives, is not a damage assessment. It is a description of a cloud. Headquarters knows only this. A single B-29, tracked by radar earlier that morning, flew over the city at approximately 31,000 feet. The air raid warning had already been lifted. The aircraft was observed but not intercepted. In the weeks prior, American planes flying alone or in pairs had been left largely unmolested. The Air Defense Command had concluded they were reconnaissance flights, not worth the fuel to chase. A Japanese pilot is diverted to investigate. He radios back what he sees from the air. Hiroshima has disappeared beneath a massive cloud of smoke and dust. He cannot make out where the city ends. He does not have words in any existing military category for what he is describing. On August 7th, Imperial General Headquarters issues a statement acknowledging that Hiroshima had suffered severe damage from a small number of aircraft, and that a new type of bomb appeared to have been used, while an investigation continued. Every word is technically defensible. 1 aircraft, 1 weapon, considerable damage, and none of them convey what has actually happened. The gap between what Tokyo knows and what Tokyo says begins here, in this first statement, and it will not close for 9 days. That same day, President Harry Truman announces the nature of the weapon from Washington. His statement is broadcast internationally and picked up in Japan. The force from which the sun draws its power, Truman declares, has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East. He calls it an atomic bomb. He states that if Japan does not accept the Allied terms, it can expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. Japan's leadership now has a name for what happened. The army does not revise its public statement. The question inside headquarters on the evening of August 7th is not whether the weapon was atomic. It is what to say about it, and what that statement will commit them to next. Lieutenant General Arisue Seo, 50 years old, and a senior army intelligence officer, departs for Hiroshima on August 8th with an investigative party to examine the destruction and help determine the nature of the weapon. The aircraft approaches from the east. What Arisu sees from the air does not resemble any form of bomb damage in his experience. The city has not been damaged. It has been subtracted. The rivers still trace their paths through the landscape, but both banks are bare. Bridges span the water with nothing left to connect. Arisue's team lands at an airstrip outside the city and moves in on foot. 2 days after the explosion, heat is still rising from the ground. The smell reaches them before the full extent of the damage does. The survivors they encounter are not behaving like survivors of a conventional bombing. Many show no visible wounds but cannot stand. Others have burns that cover their skin in a pattern, unlike anything caused by incendiary attack. Hospital records, where any hospitals still function, describe a condition that does not appear in any existing Japanese military medical category. The physicists who follow take measurements in the soil and identify residual radiation. Their findings confirm what Truman has already announced. This was an atomic bomb. Arisu flies back to Tokyo and delivers his findings to army leadership. The report is classified, and the public statement that follows is carefully constructed. Military experts, it acknowledges, are investigating the nature of the weapon. The damage at Hiroshima was severe. But the statement goes further. It argues that the effects of atomic attack can be mitigated. Proper dispersal, adequate shelter, discipline under fire. This is not a statement made in ignorance. Arisu has delivered his report. Army leadership knows what the bomb is. They know that Hiroshima, a city of roughly 350,000 people, has suffered casualties that will ultimately reach between 90,000 and 140,000 by the end of 1945. They know that Field Marshal Shunroku Hata, commander of the 2nd General Army, survived the bombing, while the destruction of its Hiroshima headquarters and the loss of much of its staff gravely crippled the command as an effective military organization. None of this enters the public statement. The language positions the bomb as a new category of threat, but a manageable one. The Army's doctrine of continued resistance is left intact. The gap between what they know and what they say has widened. It will keep widening. War Minister Anami Korechika speaks internally with senior officers on August 8th. He is 58 years old, a large man, with a reputation for composure under pressure. He has held his position since April 1945. He has overseen the preparation of Japan's home defense strategy, Operation Ketsu-Go, which anticipates an American invasion of the home islands and plans to meet it with every available soldier, weapon, and civilian resource. The strategy rests on one premise: the cost of invasion will be high enough to force a negotiated settlement before unconditional surrender becomes unavoidable. Anami's position on August 8th is that one atomic bomb, however destructive, does not change that premise. As long as the Americans have to land on Japanese soil to end the war, Ketsu-Go has a purpose. And nothing that happened at Hiroshima changes the fact that they will have to land. He does not say this publicly. He says it inside the building where Japan's strategic decisions are made, to the men who will carry those decisions forward. The Army's public line and Anami's private line are the same line. Japan will not surrender. The investigation will continue. The language of continued resistance will hold. Anami is not a fanatic blinded by ideology. He is a man who believes, with complete sincerity, that unconditional surrender means the emperor tried as a war criminal and the kokutai, the imperial system that defines Japan's identity, erased from existence. His fear is not irrational. Allied policy at this moment is deliberately vague about the Emperor's fate after the war. The Potsdam Declaration of July 26th called for unconditional surrender, but said nothing explicit about what happens to the throne. In a different room in the same city, Foreign Minister Tōgō Shigenori, 62 years old, already knows that time has run out. For weeks he has been working a channel that no one outside the inner circle is aware of. Since June 1945, Tōgō has been directing Ambassador Sato Naotaki in Moscow to probe whether the Soviet Union might mediate between Japan and the United States. The idea is simple. Moscow, still officially neutral in the Pacific War, could broker terms that avoid unconditional surrender. Sato has been cabling back warnings that Tokyo does not want to hear. The Soviets are not interested. Moscow is stalling. The language from the Soviet Foreign Ministry is empty of commitment. Sato tells Tōgō plainly that this channel will produce nothing. Tōgō keeps hoping. He does not have another option. Navy Minister Yonai Mitsumasa, 65 years old, sits on the other side of the divide, but says almost nothing. Yonai is not a man who speaks without calculation. In 9,940, he served as Prime Minister. He was toppled by the militarist faction for opposing the Tripartite Pact with Germany and Italy. The experience taught him what happens to men who say the right thing too early. He returned to the cabinet in July 1944 as Navy Minister, placed there as a counterweight to the war faction. His silence in council meetings is not passivity. It is the tactic of a man who was once destroyed for speaking and now chooses to let his vote do the talking. He supports Tōgō. He says little. What he does not say aloud is that the Imperial Japanese Navy has ceased to exist as a fighting force. The Council knows this. The Army knows this. No one states it in those terms. Army Chief of Staff General Umezu Yoshijiro, 63 years old, stands with Anami. He believes Ketsu-Go can extract a negotiated settlement. Navy Chief of Staff Admiral Toyoda Somu, 60 years old, also supports the war faction, despite commanding a navy that exists largely on paper. The 6 men of the Supreme War Council are split 3 against 3, Anami, Umezu, and Toyoda on one side, Tōgō, Yonai, and Prime Minister Suzuki Kantaro on the other. Suzuki is 77 years old. A former admiral who survived an assassination attempt by army extremists in 1936, shot multiple times and left for dead. He has spent 4 months as Prime Minister saying almost nothing publicly, constructing every statement to hold a position without revealing it. He navigates between the army's insistence on continued resistance and his own private conviction that the war cannot be won. Neither side trusts him completely. Both sides need him. This is the configuration of power in Tokyo on the evening of August 8th, 1945. 6 men. 3 against 3. 1 atomic bomb confirmed. 1 public statement that calls it manageable. 1 foreign minister whose secret diplomatic channel has produced nothing. 1 war minister whose entire strategy depends on an invasion that the bomb may have made irrelevant. And 1 prime minister who has said almost nothing for 4 months. What none of them know is that preparations on Tinian are already underway for a second atomic mission. In the early hours of August 9th, Boxcar will take off carrying the plutonium implosion bomb, later known as Fat Man. But before the morning comes, the evening delivers its own catastrophe. At 1 minute past midnight on August 9th, Soviet forces cross the border into Manchuria along a front stretching approximately 4,000 kilometers, 1.5 million troops. The Kwantung Army, Japan's largest overseas force, the formation that had held Manchuria since 1931, is under attack from 3 directions simultaneously. The Soviet declaration of war, delivered to Ambassador Sato by Foreign Minister Molotov in Moscow the previous evening, cites Japan's refusal to accept the Potsdam Declaration. The neutrality pact that Japan had maintained with the Soviet Union since 1941, the pact that Tōgō had quietly bet everything on, is finished. Tōgō's channel has not merely failed, it has reversed. The power he spent months courting as a mediator has become the newest enemy. The man who warned for weeks that Japan must seek peace before the Soviets act now stands in the wreckage of his own strategy. But the wreckage does not free him from the obligation to act. It makes the obligation absolute. When the Supreme War Council convenes its emergency session the next morning, Tōgō will not argue from the position of the man who was always right. He will argue from the position of a man who was catastrophically wrong once, and knows he cannot afford to be wrong again. The night passes. Tokyo does not sleep, and in the darkness over the Pacific, the second bomb is already on its way. The Supreme War Council convenes its emergency session at 10:30 on the morning of August 9th. The 6 men file into the conference room at the Prime Minister's official residence in Tokyo. The air inside is heavy. None of them have slept. The subject on the table is not Hiroshima. It is not the bomb. It is the Soviet Union. Foreign Minister Tōgō speaks first. His voice carries the weight of a man delivering a verdict he had tried for months to prevent. The Soviet Union has entered the war. The Kwantung Army is under attack from 3 directions across a front that stretches the length of Manchuria. The Neutrality Pact is void. The diplomatic channel through Moscow, the only channel Japan had left for a negotiated exit, no longer exists. Tōgō does not say he warned them. He does not remind the room that Ambassador Sato cabled from Moscow week after week, telling Tokyo that the Soviets would not help. He does not say any of this, because saying it would waste the only resource he has left, which is time. He says Japan must accept the Potsdam Declaration immediately, one condition: preservation of the Kokutai, nothing else. Every hour of delay brings the Soviet army closer to the home islands and makes the Allied position harder. War Minister Anami listens. He does not interrupt. When Tōgō finishes, Anami responds with the same composure he has carried since August 6th. The Soviet entry is a serious development. He acknowledges this without hesitation. But it does not change the fundamental military position. Manchuria is not the home islands. The Kwantung Army was already weakened by years of transfers to other fronts. Its loss, while significant, does not alter the calculation that matters. That calculation is Ketsu-Go. Operation Decisive, the plan to meet the American invasion on the beaches of Kyushu, with everything Japan has left. Anami has spent months preparing for this. Thousands of aircraft, many of them barely airworthy, loaded with explosives and assigned to suicide missions against the invasion fleet. Coastal fortifications, underground tunnels, civilian militia armed with bamboo spears and shaped charges. The premise has never changed. Make the cost of invasion so staggering that Washington offers terms short of unconditional surrender. Anami states his position. Japan must negotiate, yes, but not from a posture of collapse. 4 conditions: preservation of the Kokutai, no occupation of the home islands. Japan will conduct its own war crimes trials. Japan will demobilize its own forces on its own terms. These 4 conditions, Anami argues, demonstrate to the Allies that Japan's position has not collapsed. They preserve the structure that holds the nation together. One condition alone is capitulation dressed as negotiation. Army Chief of Staff Umezu supports Anami. His reasoning is military. Ketsu-Go remains viable. The atomic bomb destroys cities, but does not take ground. To take ground, the Americans must land, and when they land, the Japanese army will be waiting. Navy Chief of Staff Toyoda also supports the four conditions. He commands a navy that no longer exists in any meaningful operational sense. He does not acknowledge this. No one in the room acknowledges this. On the other side, Tōgō holds to one condition. Yonai supports Tōgō. He says almost nothing, but his vote carries a weight that his silence conceals. This is the man who was toppled as Prime Minister in 9940 for opposing the war faction. He knows what it costs to speak too early. He also knows that his single vote is what keeps the count at 3-3, which is what forces Suzuki's hand toward the Emperor. Prime Minister Suzuki listens. He does not declare his position. The argument continues. The argument is still in motion at 11:02 in the morning. At that precise moment, 400 miles to the southwest, a B-29 named Boxcar, piloted by Major Charles Sweeney, releases a plutonium bomb over the city of Nagasaki from approximately 28,900 feet. The weapon is called Fat Man. It uses an implosion design fundamentally different from the uranium bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. It is larger. It is more powerful. The original target was Kokura, an industrial city on the northern coast of Kyushu. Boxcar made 3 bombing runs over the area, but cloud, haze, and drifting smoke, including smoke associated with the major incendiary raid on nearby Yahata the previous day, obscured the Kokura arsenal. Sweeney then turned toward the secondary target, Nagasaki. The bomb detonates 1,650 feet above the Urakami district at the northern end of the city. The yield is equivalent to approximately 21,000 tons of TNT. The fireball consumes the valley. The hills surrounding Nagasaki contain the blast in some directions and channel it violently in others. Nagasaki is a port city. Population approximately 263,000. The Urakami district holds the city's largest Catholic community, centered around Urakami Cathedral, the biggest cathedral in East Asia. The Mitsubishi Industrial Works line the riverbanks. Homes climb the hillsides in dense clusters. In the first hours after detonation, an estimated 40,000 people die. The total will reach between 60,000 and 80,000 by the end of 1945. The cathedral's stone walls partially survive. The bell tower does not. A statue of the Virgin Mary will be recovered from the rubble, with half its face burned away by the heat of the explosion. During the morning session, shortly after 11:00, reports reach Tokyo that Nagasaki has been struck by another atomic bomb. Communications infrastructure in the city collapses almost immediately, the same pattern as Hiroshima 3 days earlier. The Army's communication network attempts to reach local commanders. What comes back is partial. A large explosion, a blinding flash, fires spreading across the Urakami Valley. The word atomic is not yet attached to the report when it first reaches Tokyo. It does not need to be. The pattern is already recognized. One plane, one bomb, one city silenced. News of the Nagasaki bombing reaches the leadership while the Supreme War Council meeting is still underway, adding a second atomic attack to a debate already transformed by the Soviet entry into the war. Suzuki reconvenes the council in the afternoon, with the Nagasaki report now confirmed. A second atomic bomb, a second city destroyed. The American capacity to produce these weapons is no longer theoretical. The Army's argument that Hiroshima was a single unrepeatable event has been obliterated. Anami does not revise his position. This is the moment that defies intuition. 2 atomic bombs, a Soviet invasion, and the man responsible for Japan's military strategy sits in his chair and does not change his vote. But the reason is not madness. It is not fanaticism. It is the internal logic of a position that was never built on the number of bombs. Anami's argument has never rested on whether America has 1 bomb or 10. His argument rests on a single premise. To end the war, America must invade. To invade, American soldiers must step onto Japanese soil, and when they step onto Japanese soil, they will die in numbers that no democracy can sustain. The atomic bomb flattens cities, but it does not plant a flag. It does not hold a crossroads. It does not clear a cave. Ketsu-Go is designed for the ground war, not the air war, and as long as the ground war has not begun, Anami's logic holds. The logic is wrong. It fails to account for the possibility that the atomic bomb makes invasion unnecessary, that America can simply continue destroying cities from the air until there is nothing left to invade. But the logic is internally consistent, and internal consistency is what makes it impossible to break with argument alone. Tōgō sees this. He has watched the same debate produce the same result for the third time in 4 days. He argues that attaching 4 conditions to any peace offer guarantees its rejection. The Allies will not accept Japanese control of war crimes trials. They will not agree to no occupation. They will not allow Japan to demobilize on its own terms. These 3 additional conditions are a poison pill designed to ensure that the offer fails, which is precisely why the army wants them included. An offer that fails is an offer that preserves the status quo, and the status quo is continued resistance. One condition, Tōgō insists: preservation of the kokutai. It is the only demand that has any chance of being accepted. Everything else must be surrendered. 2 atomic bombs. A Soviet invasion stretching across 4,000 kilometers. And inside the conference room, the count has not changed by a single vote. The council adjourns without a decision. The sun sets on August 9th with Japan's government unable to produce the one word that the situation demands. Suzuki prepares to do something that has no precedent in the history of Japan's modern government. The constitutional structure created under the Meiji system does not provide a mechanism for the emperor to decide policy disputes. The emperor ratifies decisions reached by consensus, he observes. He does not intervene. His role is ceremonial in function, if not in spiritual authority. What Suzuki is about to do violates every procedural norm that governs how decisions are made in Japan. Shortly before midnight on August 9th, Suzuki requests an imperial conference, a gozenkaigi. He is asking Emperor Hirohito to enter a room where the 6 most powerful men in Japan have failed to agree and to do what they cannot. He is asking the emperor to break the deadlock. The conference convenes in an underground shelter beneath the imperial palace at 11:50 at night. The room is small. The ventilation is poor. The heat is oppressive. The 6 council members are present along with several additional ministers and the president of the Privy Council. The emperor sits on a raised chair at the front of the room. The others sit below him on wooden chairs, arranged in rows. Each principal states his position. The arguments have not changed. They have only been compressed by repetition into their hardest, most irreducible forms. Anami speaks for the 4-condition approach. His voice is controlled. He does not raise it. He has prepared a written summary of the army's reasoning and distributed it before the conference began. The reasoning is consistent with everything he has said since August 6th. 4 conditions preserve what Japan is fighting to protect. 1 condition is surrender, wearing the mask of negotiation. Tōgō states the 1-condition position. The Potsdam Declaration called for unconditional surrender, but did not explicitly address the fate of the emperor or the imperial system. Japan's single demand, that the kokutai be preserved, is the minimum without which no Japanese government can function. and no Japanese soldier can be ordered to lay down arms. Everything else must be given up. Attaching conditions that the Allies will reject does not protect Japan. It guarantees destruction. Umezu speaks briefly for the army. Toyoda speaks briefly for the continued war. The arguments circle. The deadlock holds. Suzuki turns to the emperor. He says that the council has been unable to reach a consensus. He asks, with all formality and all deference, for the emperor's own view. The room goes still. Hirohito stands. He is 44 years old. He has reigned since 1926. In 19 years, no Japanese prime minister has ever asked him to intervene directly in a policy dispute between military and civilian leadership. The request itself is a statement about how completely the normal process of government has failed. The emperor speaks for several minutes. His words, recorded in notes taken by those present and later transcribed, are unambiguous. He states that continuing the war will only result in the destruction of the Japanese people and the obliteration of the nation. He has studied the army's plans for the defense of the homeland, and the preparations do not match what was promised. He expresses grief at the suffering already endured by soldiers and civilians alike. He says that the time has come to bear the unbearable. He endorses the one-condition approach. Japan will accept the Potsdam Declaration with the single demand that the Kokutai be preserved. The room is silent when he finishes. Several men are weeping. According to accounts from those present, Anami weeps. The generals weep. Misters press handkerchiefs to their faces. No one speaks. Anami does not argue. He does not retract his written summary or revise his position aloud. He bows. But what happens in this moment is more complex than obedience. In the Japanese constitutional system, the emperor's words are not a command in the Western sense. They are what is called seidan, the sacred decision, an expression of the imperial will that the council must translate into formal policy. Anami could, in theory, continue to oppose. The system does not technically forbid it. No law compels him to accept. He chooses not to oppose. And that choice, not the emperor's words, is the moment the deadlock actually breaks. A man who believes with total conviction that unconditional surrender will destroy everything Japan is, a man who has built his entire strategy around avoiding that outcome, a man who commands the loyalty of every army officer in the country, looks at his emperor and decides that his loyalty to the throne outweighs his loyalty to his own judgment. The conference ends at approximately 2:30 in the morning on August 10th. Japan's formal acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, subject to the single condition that the imperial system be preserved, is transmitted to the Allied powers through neutral intermediaries in Switzerland and Sweden at 7:00 that morning. The message is the first official communication from the Japanese government acknowledging that surrender is being considered. It is the first time the concept of surrender appears in any official Japanese outward communication since the war began. The army does not publicize what happened in the conference room. The emperor's intervention is not announced. The public statement issued on August 10th does not mention the imperial conference. It does not describe the internal division. It frames the communication to the Allies as a government initiative taken in the interest of world peace. Anami spends the morning drafting a document for distribution to the Army's senior officers. The document acknowledges that negotiations are underway. It instructs all officers to maintain discipline and combat readiness. It does not tell them what was said in the conference room. It does not tell them that the emperor has spoken. It uses the word negotiations, not surrender. The gap between what Anami knows and what he tells his officers is the same gap that has existed since August 6th. The language holds the army in position, while the position itself is already being abandoned. 2 days pass. Tokyo waits. The Allied response arrives on August 12th. Secretary of State James Burns, drafting for the United States and its allies, addresses Japan's single condition carefully. The Emperor will remain, the response states, but he will be subject to the authority of the Supreme Commander of the Allied powers. The ultimate form of Japan's government will be determined by the freely expressed will of the Japanese people. The word subject stops everything. Anami reads the Burns note and sees a violation of the kokutai. The emperor placed under the authority of a foreign general is not a preserved emperor. It is a subordinated one. The single condition Japan attached to its surrender has not been met. The negotiation, in Anami's reading, has failed. The army's case for continued resistance is by this interpretation still valid. Tōgō reads the same document and reaches the opposite conclusion. The emperor remains. The dynasty continues. The institution survives. The relationship between the Japanese government and an occupying authority is administrative and temporary. It is not a permanent transformation of what the emperor is. The kokutai endures. 2 men, the same words on the same page. 2 conclusions that cannot both be acted on. The deadlock that Hirohito broke in the underground room at 2:30 in the morning has reassembled itself around 4 words in a diplomatic note. The decision made on August 9th has not ended the crisis. It has moved it forward by exactly 1 step into a new argument over a new word, with the same men on the same sides. The Burns note divides the councils again along the identical fault line. Anami and Umezu insist the response is unacceptable. Tōgō and Yonai insist it is the best Japan will get. Suzuki calls a full cabinet meeting on August 13th. The debate runs for hours. No consensus emerges. A second imperial conference is convened for August 14th. The emperor will be asked for the second time in 5 days to resolve what the government of Japan cannot resolve for itself. The system that was never designed for imperial intervention now requires it twice. The failure is no longer a single breakdown. It is structural. The machinery of consensus that has governed Japan's decisions for decades cannot produce the word surrender. It cannot generate it from within. It can only receive it from above, from a voice that the system itself defined as silent. On the morning of August 14th, Emperor Hirohito enters the conference room and speaks before the formal presentations begin. He does not wait for each side to restate its case. He does not observe the procedural ritual that governed the First Imperial Conference 5 nights earlier. He speaks immediately. His decision of August 9th has not changed. He has reviewed the Burns note. He accepts its terms. He instructs the government to prepare the instrument of surrender immediately. Then he says something that no Japanese emperor has ever said. He tells the room that he is willing to record a personal address to the Japanese people, explaining his decision. A broadcast in his own voice, transmitted over national radio, heard in every home and factory and barracks across the country. No emperor has ever spoken directly to the Japanese people through a public broadcast. For most of the population, the emperor's voice is something they have never heard. He exists as a presence in portraits, in ceremonial silence, in the language of imperial edicts read aloud by officials. The voice itself has never crossed the distance between the chrysanthemum throne and the ears of ordinary citizens. The announcement that he will speak is, by itself, the signal that the world these people have known is over. Anami does not argue. Not this time. There is no new word in a diplomatic note to build a case around. There is no ambiguity to exploit. The emperor has spoken twice in 5 days. The system has failed twice. and the man who held the army's line through 2 atomic bombs and a Soviet invasion and an imperial intervention now sits in silence and accepts what he has spent 9 days trying to prevent. Late on the night of August 14th, inside the imperial palace, Hirohito records the rescript for broadcast. The principal recording session begins at about 11:25 p.m., and he reads in the formal archaic language that many of his subjects will struggle to understand. The address, known as the Gyokwon Hoso, the dual voice broadcast, announces Japan's acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration. It does not use the word surrender. It states that the war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. It references a new and most cruel bomb whose power to do damage is indeed incalculable. It asks the Japanese people to endure what cannot be endured and to bear what cannot be borne. The recording is placed on a set of phonograph discs. The discs are entrusted to a chamberlain. They are stored inside the Imperial Palace compound, scheduled for broadcast the following day at noon on August 15th. That night, the war almost does not end. Major Hatanaka Kenji, a young staff officer at the Ministry of War, has spent the previous days moving through the corridors of military power in Tokyo, trying to convince senior army commanders to join a coup. His plan is simple: seize the Imperial Palace, destroy the recording before it can be broadcast, isolate the Emperor from his civilian advisors, continue the war. Every senior commander he approaches refuses. The army's highest leadership, including officers who share Hatanaka's conviction that surrender is a betrayal of everything they swore to defend, will not move against the Emperor's expressed will. Hatanaka has passion but no authority. He has a plan but no chain of command. He moves anyway. After midnight, in the early hours of August 15th, Hatanaka and his fellow conspirators press Lieutenant General Mori Takeshi, commander of the 1st Imperial Guards Division, to support their attempt to stop the surrender broadcast. They need Mori's authority to issue orders to the guards. They need the guards to seal the palace grounds and prevent anyone from entering or leaving. Mori refuses. He will not sign the orders. Hatanaka draws his pistol and kills him. The conspirators forge orders under Mori's name and distribute them to the Guards Division. The soldiers, believing the orders are legitimate, comply. The palace grounds are sealed. For several hours in the early morning of August 15th, the coup controls the building where the Emperor's